All right, so let's jump right into it. Today, we're taking a deep dive into supermicrocomputer.
Okay.
And, looking at them, you're probably interested in their financials, especially their most recent 10K,
Right.
their annual financial report. And it's interesting because, on the surface, they look like they're experiencing just phenomenal revenue growth,
Yeah.
more than doubled in the past year.
Yeah.
But there are a few things that make you kind of scratch your head and want to look a little bit closer.
Yeah. It is one of those classic scenarios where you need to kind of look beyond just the surface. Supermicro has more than doubled their revenue in the past year.
Wow.
They went from $7.12 billion to $14.9 billion.
Huge.
Their net income also went up significantly from $6.39 million to $1.15 billion.
Okay.
And they are sitting on a very hefty $1.67 billion in cash and cash equivalents,
So
which is up 4 times from previously.
So it sounds like they're just absolutely killing it, but I feel like there's got to be more to the story here.
Yeah.
Where do we start peeling back the layers of the onion?
So I think a good place to start would be with their inventory.
Okay.
That has gone up a very, very significant 200%.
Wow.
From $1.45 billion to $4.33 billion.
Okay, so a huge jump like that. I mean, does that mean they just totally miscalculated what demand was going to be?
Well, it could mean a number of things, right? It could be a sign that they overestimated demand. It could be a sign that maybe there's a shift happening in the market and customers are looking for maybe a bit more customized solutions rather than the off-the-shelf type products that Supermicro is known for.
Right.
So, I mean, what are your initial thoughts on that, listener?
Yeah, that's a massive increase. So it makes you wonder, are they having trouble selling all this stuff?
Mm-hmm.
And then if so, is that why we see another interesting item in their financials, and that's accounts receivable?
Right.
That's all the money that their customers owe them.
Exactly. Accounts receivable have more than doubled to $2.73 billion.
Okay.
And you combine that with a negative cash flow. It's starting to paint a picture of a company that might be having some trouble getting paid.
Yeah.
So it raises questions about, the strength of their customer base or potentially even sales practices and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's definitely something that we're going to want to look into a little bit more.
It's starting to feel a bit like a tug of war, right?
Yeah.
You've got these just incredible revenue numbers, pulling in one direction, and then you have this growing inventory and accounts receivable situation pulling in the other.
Right. It's a real balancing act. And then to add on top of that, Supermicro decided to issue $1.7 billion in convertible bonds.
Ah, yes, the convertible bonds. Those are always fun to try to get your head around.
Yeah.
Just remind us quickly what makes those so unique.
Yeah, so convertible bonds are essentially loans that can be converted into company stock under certain conditions.
Okay.
So in this case, for Supermicro, if those bonds are converted,
Yeah.
that could mean that 8 billion new shares could be hitting the market.
Wow, 8 billion. That's a lot.
Yeah, it's a big number.
What would that do to the existing shares?
Well, essentially, you would be diluting the value of the shares,
What that?
which could impact current investors. You imagine slicing a pie into many more pieces.
Yeah.
Each piece becomes a little bit smaller.
I like that.
Yeah.
So we've got this potential dilution hanging over the heads of investors. And then at the same time, they're sitting on all this unsold inventory, and they seem to be struggling to get paid.
Mm-hmm.
What's the overall financial picture looking like at this point?
Well, despite their revenue growth, their operating cash flow has gone from positive $663 million to negative $2.49 billion.
So negative cash flow, never a good sign.
Yeah.
I mean, are they in danger of running out of money even though they have that big cash reserve?
Well, it means they burning through cash
Okay.
at a rate that's not really sustainable in the long term. They have a cushion right now,
Right.
but if that trend continues, that cushion's eventually going to disappear.
This is where it really starts to get interesting because we have this seemingly contradictory situation.
Yeah.
Record revenue, but then underneath the surface, there are all these signs of potential financial strain.
Yeah.
What do you think is the most important takeaway for our listener at this point?
I think the biggest takeaway is you really need to look beyond the surface.
Yeah.
Just because a company has impressive top-line numbers doesn't mean that everything is great.
Yeah.
You really got to dig deeper, examine the underlying trends, and ask critical questions about what's really driving these numbers.
Absolutely. And listener, I mean, what's standing out to you as we start to unpack this, what's making you curious? This is your deep dive.
Yeah.
So let your questions guide you as we continue to explore
Yeah.
supermicrocomputer.
And it's important to keep in mind that, this type of situation that we're seeing with Supermicro, it's not unique to them.
Right.
We've seen this happen with other companies that experience like really rapid growth. And, the real challenge is figuring out, okay, is this just a temporary bump in the road, or does this point to maybe some deeper structural issues within the company?
I see what you mean, because on the one hand, you could argue that this, aggressive expansion
Yeah,
requires a ton of upfront investment,
right.
which could maybe explain the inventory buildup and the increased debt.
Mhm.
Maybe they're just getting ready for something even bigger down the road.
Yeah, that's certainly a possibility, but I think it's wise to be cautious and not just jump to the best case scenario without exploring some other possibility.
Sure.
The goal here is to give you, the listener, the tools to kind of make your own informed assessment.
Okay, so let's put on our detective hats here.
Yeah.
What are some specific steps that our listener could take to
Mm.
dig deeper and determine whether these red flags are actually
Mhm.
something to be concerned about?
I think a good place to start would be to examine their customer base. Are they diversifying their clientele, or are they becoming overly reliant on just a few big customers?
That's a great point, because if they're heavily dependent on just, a handful of companies,
Right.
that could make them extremely vulnerable if those companies, run into financial trouble or decide to switch suppliers or something like that.
Exactly. And then next, I would say, take a closer look at the competitive landscape.
Okay.
Are they losing market share to rivals like Dell or HP?
Yeah.
Are
Okay.
they? What are those competitors doing differently that might be attracting customers away from Supermicro?
So it's not just about analyzing Supermicro's internal numbers,
Right.
but also understanding where they sit within the broader industry and how they stack up against the competition.
Exactly. And, while we're on the topic of external factors, you can't ignore the global economic climate.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Things like supply chain disruptions, inflation, a
Mhm.
possible recession, all of these things can have a major impact on a company's performance.
Right, because even if they're executing their strategy perfectly, those external forces could still create some real problems for them.
Exactly. So I think it's important to consider how resilient and adaptable they are.
Okay.
How are they responding to these external challenges?
Yeah.
Are they proactively adjusting their plans, or are they kind of sticking rigidly to a strategy that maybe isn't viable anymore in this current environment?
I like that. And those are all really excellent points for our listener to think about. But let's circle back to something we were talking about earlier,
Sure.
which is that potential, 8 billion share dilution from the convertible bonds. I mean, that's a massive amount of new stock potentially hitting the market, and it could definitely have an impact on existing shareholders.
Yeah, absolutely. If those bonds are converted, that could significantly dilute the ownership stake of current investors, and that could affect things like their voting rights and
Yeah.
the overall value of their investments.
So it's not just about, understanding that current, financial snapshot.
Yeah.
It's also about being able to anticipate what could happen in the future and how that might change the company's trajectory.
Right. And that kind of brings us back to a fundamental question, which is, what are Supermicro's long-term goals?
Yeah.
And are their current actions actually aligned with those goals?
Right. Because, explosive growth can be really exciting, but it's only really valuable if it's sustainable and if it helps to create value over the long term.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you could end up with what looks like a really impressive company, but in reality, it's kind of a house of cards built on a very shaky foundation.
Exactly. And to kind of get a clearer picture of that long-term vision, listener,
Yeah.
I would encourage you to look beyond just the numbers, delve into Supermicro's strategic vision.
Yep.
What are their plans for the future? Are they investing in innovation and R&D?
Yeah.
Are they diversifying their product offerings to stay ahead of the curve?
So we want to get inside the minds of Supermicro's leadership team.
Mm-hmm.
What are they focused on? And does their vision for the future inspire confidence?
Exactly. And,
Right.
and remember, the purpose of this deep dive is not to give you definitive answers. It's about giving you the right questions.
Sure.
And encouraging you to seek out the information you need to kind of form your own well-informed opinion.
Yeah, I love that it's about empowering the listener to be like an active participant in this process of discovery and analysis.
And that kind of critical thinking is so essential in today's world, especially when it comes to making financial decisions.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've looked at,
Eh.
Supermicro's impressive growth,
Yeah.
But we've also talked about some of the, potential warning signs in their financial story.
Right.
I guess, what does it all mean for our listener who's trying to piece this complex puzzle together?
I think the great thing here is that, you as a listener now have a solid foundation of knowledge about this company.
Right.
You understand the key financial indicators,
Yeah.
some of the potential risk, and most importantly, I think you have a list of questions that you can use to guide your own research.
It's like we've given you a map and a compass to navigate
Yeah.
the sometimes confusing world of financial analysis.
Yeah.
But now it's really up to you to, decide which path to take and where you want to go from here.
Right. And the skills that you develop through this process, right? Analyzing financial statements, spotting these red flags,
Yeah,
researching industry trends, those are skills that are really valuable.
absolutely.
Whether you're thinking about, investing in a company, working for one, or just trying to better understand, how the business world works.
Yeah, for sure. So let's say that you are intrigued by Supermicro
Okay.
and you're thinking about maybe making an investment.
Yeah.
What are some, specific actions or research that you would recommend doing?
I think it all starts with taking a close look at the management team.
Okay.
What is their track record? Have they successfully navigated similar challenges in the past?
Mm.
And just as importantly, are they transparent in their communication with investors?
Yeah, that's a great point because the company's leadership,
Yeah.
that can really make or break a company,
Yeah,
especially when they're facing headwinds.
exactly. And next, I would say dig deep into their product roadmap.
Okay.
Are they innovating? Are they developing cutting-edge technologies?
Mm.
Are they anticipating market trends and evolving to meet customer needs?
Right.
Or are they lagging behind the competition?
So it's not just about what products they have now, but what their vision for the future is.
Exactly.
Are they on the cutting edge or are they playing catch up?
Yeah.
Like-
And then finally, I would say you have to carefully assess their valuation.
Okay.
Is the current stock price justified
Right.
based on their financial performance and growth prospects?
Mhm.
Or is there a disconnect between maybe how the market perceives the company and, the reality of their financials?
Yeah, that's a tough area for a lot of people to get their head around.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to just get caught up in the hype or what
Yeah.
the general sentiment is. But you really have to ground your decisions in some solid analysis
Yeah.
and a realistic, idea of what the company's really worth.
Couldn't agree more. And remember, listener investing always carries some level of risk.
Of course.
There are no guarantees.
Right.
But by arming yourself with knowledge, with that critical mindset, you can make more informed choices
Yeah.
that align with your financial goals.
I mean, that's what this whole deep dive has been about, right?
Exactly.
Empowering you to be a more informed, more confident, and more engaged, participant in the world of finance.
So as you continue to explore, whether it's Supermicro or any other company that interests you,
Mm-hmm.
just keep in mind the key takeaways from our discussion today.
Yeah.
Look beyond the headlines, dig into the details, and always ask those tough questions.
And never stop learning.
Yeah,
This is a constantly evolving world,
it is.
especially the world of finance. And to stay ahead, you really have to be committed to ongoing education and exploration.
So keep diving deep, stay curious, and remember, knowledge is power. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. That's going to wrap it up for this deep dive into Supermicro Computer.
Thanks for joining us.